Hey everybody, welcome back to the Loomcast. It is Bill Butrymowicz, and we have this is our second episode. It's been an interesting week to say the least. We had BevNet live in New York this week, which was awesome as always. Thanks to the BevNet crew. They've always supported us from day one, so I appreciate that. So I got into the city on Tuesday night, and I ended up meeting up with my oldest friend, who he lives in Hell's Kitchen, and I ended up going out to dinner with him. And I wanted a place to stay in the city so that I could be at the event early. It started early in the morning. So a couple of distributor partners that I'm friends with, we all stayed at the same place. And we got to BevNet early. Brian Tice came in from Philadelphia and met up. And we got to talk to a lot of people, the Niagara folk, a lot of new brands. It was fun. What wasn't fun was the fact that I parked on the street. So they had like alternate side of the road parking, which led to my car being towed. So I guess it was Wednesday night. We went out. We had a night of dinner at the Capitol Grill. Got to see all the NIDA guys. And then when I woke up in the morning and I planned on driving my car over towards BevNet, the car was gone. So I figured either it was stolen or it had been towed. And they don't tell you where your car is being towed or what's going on. So you have to figure all that out on your own. So I said, screw it. I brought my luggage back to BevNet for day 2. And then we walked around and we hung out, and we saw Ralph Crowley from Polar Speak. And then I took an Uber into Brooklyn, the Naval Yard, which is where they bring all the towed cars from New York. And that is like a scene in itself. So you get in there and it's like the strangest people. There was like this big meathead dude with no shirt on, like laying on the ground doing calisthenics. And then it was really, really wild. And NYPD could care less about trying to help you out at all, which I get it. So I got my car back after about 3 hours, in which I drove home and then realized I left my luggage. So you have to they give you, first of all, they want your insurance card before they'll give you your car back. But I mean, who carries their car insurance around with them in their wallet? So in order to get it out of your car, you have to get a police escort, where there's a police car that basically transports people from the police station to their car. It has to be purposely. They found the smallest car possible. It's like a Fiat. And you get in the back seat with 2 other people. The one guy had no shirt on. It was the one day of the summer that it was like 90 degrees. And I couldn't fit my luggage in the back seat with us. So they said security would hold it for me. And by the time that we found my car and we left, and then I got home, I had forgotten about my luggage and I had to drive back yesterday. So it was par for the course. It happens. Worst things could have happened. But either way, today is June 15th. And I thought that this would be a good time to do our second episode because it's Father's Day. And if any of you have listened to the Founders podcast, I highly suggest it. It basically, this guy, David Senra, he basically reads all of these autobiographies of former founders and then summarizes them in about an hour. And they're really, really good. And and one of the like ongoing themes that he has in his podcast is that in the story of the founder is the story of the father, because typically, it takes a village kind of thing. And that's why I thought that this episode would be important, because I wanted to have my dad on to explain and ask him some questions about how he got started in the beverage industry and basically how I've ended up where I am today. So, Dad, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, Bill, how you doing?
I'm doing good. Happy Father's
Happy
Day.
Father's Day. Happy Father's Day to you.
Did you play golf this morning?
I did not. I woke up at about 3 o'clock in the morning. My back was killing me. Took a muscle relaxer and never woke up again until 10:30. So today has been a lazy day. Wasn't a good golf day anyway.
No. I wanted to have you on because I wanted to go through and just we didn't prep you for this or anything. Just talk about how you got started in the industry and, pivotal moments and et cetera. So, obviously I know you grew up in Kearney. You moved out of Newark, I guess during the riots, right? Is that correct?
Yes, we did. Yep, we moved out during the 65 riots, I think.
And you ended
Or
up growing up in
65 or 67. Yeah,
and
grew up in Kearney.
Yep, you grew up in Kearney, and then your first job out of high school, or at least in the beverage industry, was for Hoffman Soda. Is that correct?
It was. It was in Newark, in the old Ballantine building down in Newark.
How
I
did
think
you?
Honickman had owned it at that time. My dad worked in Pop worked in a paint factory, and one of the guys he worked with, this guy, Mike Salvatore, he used to coach or referee basketball. And one of the guys he refereed basketball with was also um, in the beverage business. He worked for American Beverage. I think they were in Queens at the time, College Point, Queens, because that's where I had to go and train for the job that I was getting. And I'm pretty sure it's a lifetime ago, but I think Honickman owned it at the time. They had bought the Hoffman brand, which probably nobody listening to this will ever know what Hoffman soda is, but it's 28-ounce glass, sort of like back in the day with Cott and Bowler and all those other brands.
Okay, so you apply for a job and you get a job as a truck driver, right?
He got me a job, and he got me a job working inside. And I don't want to get off track, but pretty funny. When I was going for my interview for the job, my job was to be a check-in person, just like you were at Seaview. The drivers would come back, and I would take their cash, and I would settle up the cases and make sure everything zeroed out, and make a deposit the next day. So, on my way there for the interview, which I pretty much already had the job anyway, but it's before GPS and all this other stuff. I had to drive to College Point, Queens, and all it said was George Washington Bridge. It didn't say George Washington Bridge to the Whitestone Bridge to this or that or anything. And I wound up in Harlem, couldn't find the place, had to go back and start over again. And I didn't have any money for tolls to come home. So I had to run through all the tolls to show, and then, fess up later to them that I'm terrible with, it was just strange. I'm handling their money and I don't have enough toll money to get.
Yeah, it's kind of weird that they would let you handle their money as somebody who's just coming on, who's just being employed for the first time.
It was a friend of a friend. They were doing the guy my father worked with, Mike Salvatore. They were doing him a favor hiring me. So I wound up in Newark at night, and I would wait for the drivers to come in and settle up their paperwork. And then I saw that they made a lot more money than I did. So I wound up getting myself a route. My first route was in Passaic. I used to do Botany Village over there. I did Passaic and Patterson, that area out there.
And you were like, how old?
I was 18.
Got it.
I was right out of high school. I was 17, 18 years old, right out of high school. First real job. And I wound up getting a job out, driving in that area. And I wound up talking to all of the other beverage guys behind the shop rights and stuff, and found out that the Pepsi guys made a lot more money than I did. So I went to South Kearney and applied for a job and got a driving job for Pepsi.
Got it.
I shaped up there.
Got it. And at this point, were you married and had kids when you
When
had you had
I
me yet?
No, I wasn't married. I used to, they called it shaping up, where you would wait for the phone call every day to see if somebody called out sick. If somebody called out sick, you'd go in and work. At nighttime, I was dating your mom. At nighttime, I would I would bartend in Kearney, and then so I was kind of doing two jobs at the time, and then a route finally came up. I was eighth on the seniority list, and I couldn't understand why nobody wanted this route. This guy Bobby Clark was retiring, and he did the Central Ward of Newark, and he was an older guy, and I had eight people with more seniority in front of me, and they all passed on this route. And I was like, this route makes almost $30,000 a year. And we're talking 1978. That's pretty a lot of money. It was a lot of money for me back then. So I wound up taking the route, bidding on the route, getting it. And then I, found out why nobody wanted the route. I was getting
Yeah.
held up every day.
Yeah, I mean, we've obviously I've heard all your war stories, and obviously during the 80s, Newark hasn't been a nice place since, but I'm sure during the 80s with the drug epidemic that was going on, it must have been really tough sledding. I mean, what does that look like? I mean, when you get up every morning and you're going into some of the arguably one of the roughest neighborhoods in the country, how do you, I mean, were you, how does that happen? Like, were you mentally
I was
prepared for
shitting
that
my
or what?
pants.
All right.
No, not at all. I was literally shitting my pants every day. I was probably 145 pounds, you know, little white kid, and, in a black neighborhood where, crack had pretty much just come onto the scene. So there were a lot of drug addicts. There was a lot of robberies. And I would work alongside, the way we did it back then, we'd work alongside other vendors. One of my best friends, you probably know him, Scott Piper. He ran a Coke route for his uncle, and we would try and meet up every day just to keep an eye and watch each other's back. Obviously, you couldn't stay with each other, all day. You had different stops to do, but yeah, I got held up pretty a lot in the beginning, and I am happy to say that I was one of the reasons why South Kearney wound up putting safes in the trucks, because back in the day you did a lot of mom and pop business and everybody paid in cash, and I would be on the other side of the plexiglass, counter, and they would just open the drawer with a thing full of cash while people were waiting online, waiting to buy things. And, they'd see me
Yeah. Do you
stuff
think
the
a lot
money
of
in my
those people,
pocket.
do you think a lot of those people were in on it?
I think they were. I think they were. I don't think a lot of them, but I definitely do think some of them were. And, after a while, when I would come in, I'd come in and they would actually like rip my pants off, like rip the pockets off of my pants. And they would just do like really shitty things to me. And I'd come in, I wouldn't have the money to settle up, and I would explain what happened out there. And my supervisors, I was a Teamster 125 then, and my supervisor comes up to me and he goes, "Billy, you got to find, get yourself some, a helper in the
Protection.
truck,
Yeah.
that somebody that could protect you." And I was like, Frankie Granado was was my supervisor. I go, Frankie, it's, that's against the Pepsi law. You're not allowed to have anybody in the truck. I don't want to get fired. And he was like, have you ever seen a supervisor in your area? So I went out and I found somebody, and he was basically my backup. And I I implemented a rule out there that if I got robbed at your store, I was never coming back, for that simple reason that you just said. Some of the people were in on it. They would hit, they would push through, $300 that looked like $3 million because it was all singles.
Right.
And I'd be walking out with my pockets full.
Right.
So little by little, I got to know all the accounts. And
But they don't like beat you up, right? They just basically rob
I
you.
definitely I got my butt kicked. I definitely got my butt kicked. I had those metal grate cellar door things that are in the ground kicked over on my head, knocked me down the stairs. Yeah, I had a couple times where, that I definitely did get beat up.
Right. Yeah, that's scary stuff. I mean, I remember I think you have post-traumatic stress syndrome actually, because when we tried to go to lunch in Newark before one of the Devils games one night, we were kind of in a nasty neighborhood, and I could see the look on your face to where you weren't enjoying being back in the old neighborhood.
No, definitely. It's scary. A young kid, you're 18, 19 years old, and people are coming at you with guns and knives and stuff like that. And it scared the shit out of me. People on my route, the RC guy got beat up so bad that they paralyzed him. He got beat with a golf club. Where the hell they'd find a golf club in that neighborhood, I don't know. But he got beat with a golf club, and they broke his neck. It was scary. It was definitely scary.
Yeah, it sounds it. And how did you find backup? You just found some dude that was hanging out in front of a store or something like that?
I wound up, they said, find somebody from the neighborhood. And it wound up, I found somebody, this kid, Malcolm, and it wound up a lot of the other Pepsi guys. As I found out later, I was still like kind of new to the company. They had helpers, and they used to all go up Summit Ave in East Orange and pick them up in these projects. And I just found one of the kids, and his pay was $15 a day and 2 hot dogs. It was actually $20 a day and 2 hot dogs for lunch. And if I promised him the entire week, he cut it down to $15 a day.
Got it.
But that was it was sketchy. He bailed me out a bunch of times. He definitely bailed me out a bunch of times. I remember I backed up into a car on Clinton Ave in Newark. And the owner of the car jumps out. He comes running up, and I'm apologizing as I'm sitting in the driver's seat. And I'm telling him it's 100% my fault. I'll give you my insurance and blah, blah, blah. And he opens the door and starts like, he's going to come in. He's going to pull me out of the truck. And before he got a chance to do that, Malcolm grabbed him, pulled him back to his car, and did 5 times the amount of damage on his car with this guy than I did hitting him. So it was like, and even stuff like that, it was like I was way out of my element. I was not comfortable with that. And you say PTSD, I still to this day, I don't consider myself a chicken by any stretch of the imagination, but I still to this day have nightmares about working in Newark.
Yeah, you are not one to back down from confrontation, to say the least. But
but that scared me.
Yeah, it does. It gets to a level where you're in certain neighborhoods where there's just really no like respect for life that could be scary. You know what I mean?
Right.
So you ended up working at Pepsi for how long? Because I know you didn't leave Pepsi and start Seaview until '89. So you were at Pepsi for a while. Did you move off of that route?
I didn't move off of that route. What happened was when I found out that I was getting that route, um, I asked your mom to marry me because I knew that I would have enough money to support us. And then, you know, needless to say, you came along right after that, and we built a brand new house in Jackson, and then I couldn't get off of that route. Then it was like the route made X amount of dollars, and I would be going backwards, and so I stayed on that route for a pretty long time. I stayed on that route for probably about 9 years before I moved up into Maplewood, Irvington, that Linden area, that route. But I worked there for 12 years,
So,
and I
so,
used to do.
so
I
I'm,
used
I'm sure I'm sure you got the like hang of it, and everybody in the neighborhood starts to know you after a while, or is that not the case?
I did. I knew all the people that worked in the stores. I knew the people. I knew the places. You would have to run your route differently every day. You would have to. You couldn't like on Tuesdays. You have 20 stops or whatever. You couldn't do them in the same order because people would wait for you. So I learned how to manipulate time and everything else. And I had a lot of the people that owned the stores were really good people, and I would go there and have breakfast with them and this or that and every other thing. And it was just getting accustomed to working there, but the violence and everything else that was around never stopped.
Right.
Every day, I never grew comfortable into, oh, I'm going to work today. I'd be driving up the turnpike saying, oh God, I got freaking, I'm an hour away from this. It was nasty. It was definitely nasty.
So you moved to Jackson, which is probably that's a pretty big curveball in your entire story. I'm assuming from growing up in Newark and in Kearney, kind of the city, and being right outside of New York City. You could just hop on the path, and you end up moving to Jackson. What brings you to Jackson? Was it just cheap?
It was. You could build a brand new house. I built a brand new house with another guy that worked at Pepsi. He had a Jersey City route, Charlie McPhee. He was a young guy just like me from Matawan, and we built brand new houses across the street from each other in this new development for $56,000. Um, just on an acre of land, and it was like once again out of the element. Used to Kearney, working in Newark, and then winding up in Jackson on an
That was the country
acre
for
of
you.
property. Oh, it was a fresh air fund. Matter of fact, Charlie McPhee used to bring home his helper, and his wife would be like shaking her head, and all the neighbors would be like, oh my God, who the hell is that? And stuff. And we used to joke and call it Charlie's Fresh Air Fund. He'd bring them there for the weekend.
That's
The
funny.
people were good. Yeah, there's a lot of good people. There was also a lot of bad people too. So
Yeah. So you're there for 9 years or whatever you said, or 12 years. And then you decide, at what point are you deciding that you think you're going to leave being a truck driver to do something else?
well, I wound up. I used to deliver to a good friend of mine, Jeff Mulligar. Before he owned Atlantic Beverage, he had uh, food wagons. He had one of the roach coaches and stuff,
Mm-hmm.
and he used to buy pallets of product from me. But when I delivered product to him, I'd see that he would have a trailer of Coke, a trailer of Pepsi, this and that. He became a redistributor. He would go out and find cheap product and then sell it to stores, undercut the trucks up and down the street. So I saw him doing this, and I saw that he was growing and growing and being successful. And I was like, I think I could do that. And I think I could do it in South Jersey. So that gave me the idea of starting my own place. I knew all the chain stores and all the Coke and Pepsi, 7 Up drivers, and I figured I'd just be a redistributor, work on a half a buck a case, and if I can make a living down there and not have to go up there into that mess, that's what I was going to do.
Okay, so you decide to quit your job, and you're gonna. I mean, are you shitting your pants when? I mean, you have
Yeah, absolutely.
2 kids at the
Absolutely.
time.
No, absolutely. You know, Kyle was born after that, your brother, and you know, but it was just no way to live. It really was. It was a terrible way to live. You know, having to be afraid to go to work every day and everything else that came along with it. So I figured this will be my chance. I'll do it. One of our neighbors, when I decided to do this, but even before that, I decided I was going to have vending machines, and I'd go out and I'd fill vending machines and try and, you know, make some money doing that. Um, but one of our neighbors, Reed Nylander, was banker, and he offered to give me a $50,000 loan to start my business. So I rented 1,000 square foot warehouse next to Groans in Toms River on Route 9, and I just started pulling product in and going up
From
and down the
where?
street
From,
and selling
from,
it. I would go up north. You know, ShopRite would have a sale on Coke cans, and I would talk to the Coke driver, and I'd talk to the ShopRite manager who I probably knew. And it was like, all right, I'm going to go into the store, pay for the product, and he's just going to throw it into the back of my van. And Jeff from Atlantic used to leave the keys to his box truck in under the mat, and I would go up on the weekends and I would grab his truck, fill it up with 1,000 cases of Coke cans, and sell them to him, and leave it at his back door. So he was a big help.
Interesting.
After yeah, after a couple months,
I mean, were you shitting your pants when you were quitting your job as a truck driver?
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. But you know, you see other people do it, much like what you're doing right now. You're following somebody else's playbook, and it's like, you know, copying, imitating successful people is a good way to become successful yourself. And that's pretty much what I did. I saw Jeff the way he was doing it, and luckily Snapple came along. But because I probably couldn't have succeeded, there weren't enough bad areas in South Jersey to make his business model work for me. But as I was going out, people were talking about Snapple, and the Snapple guys down there were upcharging $1 a case. And this is 1989, so yeah, it was pretty good. I mean, it was twice as
You're
much
saying it
as
was
I
good
was
margin
making.
for them. You're saying.
Yeah, it was good margin for them. Yes, so I became one of the 8 or 9 distributors we had down in Ocean Monmouth County at the time, Burlington
Right.
County.
And at that point, was it owned by Joe Rosamilia?
Joe Rosamilia owned half of the state. Excuse me. Joe Rosamilia owned just about half of the state. The southern part of the state was owned by Honickman, Canada Dry, Pensauken, and Fisher Thompson was around up north. There was Cot Passaic, all the Cot people up there. Reuben was up in Bergen County. They were Cot people up there, and they were the Snapple guys up there. But Joe Rosamilia owned the lion's share of New Jersey. And
Got it.
he had like 8 people working for him down south in our territory.
All right. So there's somebody that owns the distribution rights, and they're selling the product to other people to go out and basically do the legwork for them, and they're making $1 a case.
Absolutely.
Got it. So, you notice Snapple out in the street, and you start saying, "All right, this is a brand that we're gonna try to hustle as well, right?"
Yeah, absolutely. So I wound up, getting in touch with Pat Sematini from Pat's Beverage. He was up in Ocean Township, very close to where you live, like by Seaview Seaview Square Mall up there.
Mm-hmm.
And he had a real small place, but he would sell me product and I'd be able to go out and open accounts.
Got it.
And the way Joe Rosamilia ran it was he had all of these distributors that could buy from him. I wasn't able to buy from him at that time. I had to buy from one of those guys. And he would, if you open an account, you got to keep the account. So it was, you know,
Jeez,
it
that
was
would never fly nowadays.
No, but if you think about it, it was a pretty smart way for him to do it because let us all claw and fight over all these accounts, and he's getting good distribution out there.
Yeah,
So I wound up
I-
going and buying from Pat for probably almost a year.
Yeah, I remember you didn't have trucks though at the time. It was all out of
I
vans.
did, and they all had names. It was like
Yeah,
the
so
first
I
truck I bought was $200. The pumpkin.
Yeah, I remember specifically
that?
picking up a truck with you that Mom's father had got us. That you were very unhappy about. That was a very awkward drive home in this beater up van where the side door didn't work, and it was just like a piece of crap.
Right. We called it the pumpkin.
That was
You
the
drive
pumpkin.
down the block
Yeah.
and all the doors would flap open and close. It was an orange van. It looked like shit, but it got the job done. That was the first truck.
So we were basically in it was like a storage unit almost.
It was.
Right?
It was the same size as a storage unit. It was just about 1,000. It was just about 1,000 square feet, and and I would bring stuff that I would buy from my Pepsi friends up north, my Coke friends up there, RC guys, and I would just go around to all these mom and pops down in Toms River, Seaside, and I would try and sell it to them. And
so what do? You sell it. You sell it till your morning starts. You're selling the cases during the day, and then you're delivering them too. So are you delivering them the next day? Are you only selling for half of the week and delivering the other half of the week? Or are you selling it out of the back of the van?
I went out. I didn't sell it out of the back of the van because I wouldn't have known what to throw into there. But I mean, I would go out in the morning. I'd go out like 7:00 in the morning and go try and take orders until 12. Any orders I got, I would come back. Pop had left work. He had a respiratory problem and stuff, and he was out of work and he couldn't do anything. And he told me that he would, give me a hand starting. So I would call him and tell him what orders we had, and he'd have them ready. And I'd run back there, fill up the van, go out and deliver it.
Wow.
People would say, "Oh, didn't you take my order this morning?" And I'd tell them, "No, that was my brother." It's all about illusion, I guess.
Yeah.
So that's, and then as we I was the first one out of the distributors down here to buy a real beverage truck, the Booger, a green, I forget, maybe a Roll-'em Rock truck or something like that. That we painted white and put Snapple decals on it. I was definitely legit. And one by one, each one of the other Snapple guys wound up getting in financial problems, or they had this problem or that problem. And Joe Rosamilia, being the optimist, or being the true entrepreneur that he was, he would be like, "Do you want his accounts? Do you want me to start selling you? Pay his debt, and you're the guy." And one by one, GNS was down at the time, Juice Broker. I can't even remember. Pats.
So you start to basically take over all these other businesses. That was pretty cool that Pop came and worked basically for free. I mean, was he doing physical labor? Like,
no, he wasn't. He was basically just answering the phones and just writing down what I was telling him that people ordered. But I wouldn't let him.
There couldn't be a more unqualified person to answer phones in the history of receptionery.
I mean, I grew up with the guy, and he probably spoke 12 words to me in the first 17 years I lived at home.
Right.
I mean, he didn't have a lot to say, and but he was a character, and it almost came, it came in real handy. I can remember Scott from S&P up in Newark. We would trade product back and forth, and his father would come, and they were both two old Polacks from Pennsylvania, and start doing their spiel back and forth, talking bad about everybody, doing all racist comments. I'd be like,
Right.
oh my God. It's like, I can't listen to you guys anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. And then at some point, mom is going to come work for the company, or was that later?
She is. We worked the first year we worked out of Route 9, and I got hooked up with Bob Mooney, who's our general manager's father, and he passed away in an account, and I wound up getting his business for the debt that he owed. Bob was just a kid at the time. And we moved to Swarthmore Ave, 1985 Swarthmore Ave, and got a 3,000 square foot warehouse.
Well, that would be
And
1995, right?
1990. It was the second year.
Okay, 1990.
So we wound up, we got that, and it had like a little office space. The first place had no office. And, the first year, the first 4 months of sledding were really tough. Nothing happened there. But when the summer came around, I saw that I could pick up the seasonal business, and we sold some product, and I saw like a little glimmer of light there that this is possible. So I wound up getting a bigger warehouse, 3,000 square foot. I mean, our offices are much bigger than that now, but I mean, that was a big place. I remember getting the first trailer product and like just wanting to take pictures of it because it looked so good, stacking, pallets up 3 high. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Like,
Mom
did you
came
ever
and
work?
worked.
Did you ever worry about like, oh my God, this like might not work, and like, what am I going to do? Or
Oh,
did you
absolutely.
just figure if this doesn't work, I'll get another job as a
But it
driver
wasn't going to
somewhere?
kill me. It wasn't going to kill me.
Sure.
So, so it was like the worst thing that could happen is second year, I went through all the cash that I had because we wound up buying 2 trucks. We bought 2 beverage trucks from Ocean Beverage, who isn't around anymore. They did all oddball brands of beer. And they were 2 gas side loaders. We painted them up, and we looked legit out there. We just trudged away. Mom had worked when I quit Pepsi. Mom worked at McLean, who distributes all health and beauty aids to Wawas, and
Right.
she did that to cover our benefits. And I figured by the end of the first year, I was like, why don't you come in? Why don't you help? Why don't you answer the phone instead of Pop answering the phone? And she did.
Yeah. I mean, I remember mom working for McLean, and she used to like let us like sit in the back of the van and like drive around with like all the totes. Probably something that you can't get away with nowadays, but either way, we
Yeah.
thought it was interesting. Okay, so you buy your first load of Snapple. At what point do other brands start to come over to you, or what point did you feel like after you bought your first load, what is the next step in the whole process that you were like, oh my God, like I can't believe this is happening, or we need to get bigger,
Well,
or
they
are
were
new brands
selling
coming
me.
to us?
They were selling me now. Now I was on the map because Joe Rosamilia was selling me. I made sure that I paid my bills on time. I was not going to be the problem. Plus, I was the only one with supermarket skills because the other guys were candy and tobacco people selling the product, and they really didn't know about resets or cutting in shelf space and this and that in the supermarkets. Snapple was just getting a footing, getting authorizations into Food Town and this and that. So I was definitely a little more valuable to Joe. Um, so started doing that. There was a company called Modern Beverage around then, and they were grabbing all the new products. They grabbed the Mystic and Clearly Canadian and all the stuff back in the day that was hot. And pretty much we did Gatorade, Yoo-Hoo. But the first outside beverage that came to me was Sobe,
Oh
which
yeah.
was a pretty big one. That was a really big one.
Yeah, I remember
The
Sobe.
Lizard King,
I
John
remember Sobe.
Bello.
I remember Sobe really being. We were moving a lot of it, like almost as much Snapple as we were moving. It felt like remember working in the warehouse, and those cases were so heavy. They were like 18-ounce glass bottles, 24 per case, which it doesn't sound like much, but it's an extra 2 ounces per bottle in a 24 pack. It was heavy when I was, probably 12 or 13 years old. But those Sobe had really taken off. I remember we had a couple Sobe trucks too. We had a black Sobe trucks with the lizards on the side of them, and they came out with like the white one with the lizard snowboarding on it and whatnot.
Yep.
And actually, Gatorade was in glass too. The 32-ounce Gatorade was
Yeah.
also in glass.
I mean, everything. It's the evolution of beverages. It goes. There used to be 3 liter Pepsi and Coke that had the necks of them had to weigh 5 pounds each one. Like a case of those things were probably 70 plus pounds. And before OSHA rules and everything else made them, knock all the weights down, it was definitely, Gatorade 32 ounce was glass, all of that stuff. It was not they were tough cases to handle at the time.
Yeah, Stewart's had 32-ounce glass too.
Yeah, yeah. So Sobe
Um,
came around, and Sobe wound up being a big plus for us. They came out, and then Snapple wanted to, I guess, not imitate Sobe, but they came out with the elements that they pretty much imitated their bottle. I guess even back before that, we were selling so much Snapple that every case, it was sort of like what I guess Prime did a couple of years ago, but every case that came in, we would just go to a 7-Eleven, fill up the truck and say, this is what I have. And they'd say, yes, well, give me, we had 2 doors in each one of the 7-Elevens. They would take whatever you had and it would sell. Snapple became very, very hot.
yeah, so Snapple blew up, and I mean, it was on The Sopranos and Howard Stern, and I mean, it was just this cultural phenomenon, especially in the like New York, New Jersey metro area. So at what point are you moving into 195 Lehigh for your next location?
Well, we stayed in that building for 1 year. Vic Iorio owned half of the industrial park, and I told him, if I outgrow this space, you have to be able to give me, additional space. Otherwise, I'm going to have to move. And I wound up lasting 1 year. He didn't have more space. We moved into 7,500 square foot at 195. We had unit 13, that first unit.
Right. And that's where I
So,
mean, I like grew up basically in that warehouse. You know what I mean? And that
oh,
office
absolutely.
between answering phones and rollerblading in the warehouse and loading trucks at
Yeah.
night with convicted felons, and the whole nine. It was Beverage 101 to say the least. What I
Yeah,
mean,
well, even before that, it was you were cleaning product in the breakage pile, and it's
mhm.
you can't tell somebody. We had a relative who I'm not going to name, but one of our relatives had come and asked for a job and asked for a management job, and it just like I started laughing because I'm thinking to myself, you know, who starts like that? It's like you can't manage somebody unless you've done that job. And you shouldn't tell anybody to do something that you weren't willing to do yourself at one time. So, I mean, I remember you in the breakage pile and mom yelling at me because you had all little nicks and cuts in your fingers. Case of Snapple comes back as one broken bottle. It's like we don't have a bad case. We have one bad bottle. Repack it, clean the bottles, and sell it the next day.
Yeah,
Loading
Yoo-hoo was the
trucks.
worst. Yoo-hoo was the worst. It was
Yeah.
like there's nothing worse than broken cases of Yoo-hoo on a 95-degree day in the summer when you're 13 or whatever. Um, so yeah, so we I know that we started growing there. So after Sobe, like what brands start coming to where we start becoming like more diverse?
Well, everybody saw what happened when there wasn't enough Snapple. Arizona came onto the scene. They had that whole Southwest motif, and they came out and they were able to sell product because we couldn't supply everybody with the stores with enough. So they came out, and then Arizona wound up following after that. Or I'm sorry, Sobe wound up following after that, and when Sobe was out, they posed a real threat to Snapple, and that's when Quaker Oats had bought Snapple, and they thought that they would just buy it and they would run it like Gatorade, sell it to whoever they wanted to. They didn't realize they had contracts with people. They didn't have a contract with us, but they had contracts with other people, and that went down as like one of the worst business deals ever. I mean, they paid a ton of money for it and they sold it for nothing. And Triarch wound up coming in and buying it, and they revived the brand. And Triarch came down and met with us, John Keneally and John Bello and all those guys, and they said, "Well, if you could, you know." The Snapple guys said, "Well, if you can get rid of that, we can give you more territory. We can give you the Canada Dry territory." So
If you dump Sobe.
if I dump Sobe, I did. If I dump them specifically before the summer. So I
Right.
wound up, I did do that. I did do that, which I made a lot of enemies. But Canada Dry was the last one that I was splitting the area with. So it wound up being we were in a good position because now we were getting the reputation of getting the good brands and making them successful. So, you answer to your question, the next great brand that came along was probably Stewart's Root Beer. They were owned by Cable Car, um, which Joe Rosamilio wound up buying into that thing. And like I said, it's like a lifetime ago. I can't remember all
Yeah,
the other
yeah,
brands
yeah.
that
No,
came, but
it's fine. So we basically we get the rights to the KDP, which is now KDP distribute brands, right? So at the time it was Stewart's, Yoo-hoo, Mystic, Nantucket, Snapple. That's pretty much it,
right.
right?
They moved them over one at a time. They moved Snapple over to us, and then we wound up buying Stewart's from them. Um, we bought that brand. I think Canada Dry had that brand too. Um, they started moving all their brands over to us.
Yeah, and at that point we moved basically next door, which was what was that, like forty-five
Right.
thousand
It
square
was
feet?
right. Yeah, it was Rika. It was a luggage. They made London Fog luggage.
Right.
nice part about our building was owned by Jim Reddington, who he was an engineer by trade and wound up starting this project and building this building, and the guy who he was building it for ran out of money, so he wound up inheriting that building. He took it for the money that was owed, and as we wanted more space in there, he would put a floor in, close up the wall, and then came Unit 12, and then Rika was in Unit 10, and we wound up taking that space, so we wound up in 50,000 square feet. But that we're in right now.
Yep. Yeah, it's wild. I mean, we've seen so many brands that have come and go, and I think like as a distributor, you have to be, brands get acquired, or brands fall on their face too. It's like you look at what happened with Bang, you look at what's happening with Prime. Not that they've completely fallen on their face, but it's like you can be a multi-billion-dollar brand one minute, and you could be fighting for your life the next. And that's just something weird. Is getting into this, being a brand owner now, and I'm sure something that you completely understand as an entrepreneur. I mean, you've had other businesses since then. It's like there's such emotional swings of one day you feel like, oh my God, like this is crazy. Like, I can't believe this is all working out. This is going to be huge. And then it's the next day you're like fearing for your life. You're more of a fear for your life kind of guy on the regular, as far as business goes. But I mean,
definitely.
You have to kind of really manage that a little bit, I guess,
You do, and it's only because you've been around long enough to know how many new brands come out and how many actually make it, and how many brands should have made it that didn't make it for one reason or another, and how many brands shouldn't have made it and did explode. I mean, I can remember having Mike Rapoli and somebody else leaning over me, and Bob were on our way to Interbev, a beverage conference in New Orleans, and them leaning over trying to sell us Glassell, trying to get us to carry that product. And we said, no, which we
Vitamin
really
water.
should have said yes. Yeah, vitamin. Well, they were Glassell then they, filed bankruptcy 4 or 5 times, and they turned into vitamin water. And, it's, you see some brands, all I could think of is leaning over, asking me to sell vitamin water. It's water with vitamin in it. And all I could think of is, wow, after I take vitamins in the morning, those vitamin burps are the worst thing in the world. Like, that sounds like such a terrible idea. Yeah, that sounds like such a terrible idea, but what do I know? You know what I mean?
Yeah. You have to learn to
one of the most successful deals.
Yeah, you have to learn to take your personal opinion out of it a little bit and kind of look more at the business side of it and who's actually the guy behind the brand, or who the team is behind the brand. It's like I've learned all that stuff pretty early. It took me a long time. I think it takes anybody a long time, because your natural instinct is like, I compare it to, it's like when you go to the movies and you're watching the trailers before the movie starts, and your initial reaction is what you honestly think. And you lean to the person next to you and you say, oh, that looks good. Like, we should check that out. I'm looking forward to that. Or you're like, this looks like crap. Well, the same thing happens when somebody hands you a new drink that you've never heard of before. You have no emotional attachment to it. You don't know who's behind it or whatnot. But you have to realize that, like, every brand isn't made for you. You know what I mean? So, I mean,
it's a hard thing to do.
It is. It's a hard
thing to taste taste a product, and you don't like the taste of it, so you're going to dismiss it.
Yeah, I mean, you look at Red Bull, and it's like Red Bull didn't care about the taste. They came straight out and said, we don't even care about the taste. And obviously, people acquired a taste over time. You brought up coconut water. It's like, yeah, we didn't like Vita Coco in the beginning, or you didn't like the taste of coconut water in the beginning, but obviously, the whole rest of the planet is drinking coconut water, and people tend to love it. So it's like, what the hell do we know? And that's one of the things that, even when I meet with buyers, it's like they taste it and like they're making a decision based upon whether they like it or not. And I kind of just look at it like, what if this isn't for you? Like I get to
Right.
take home any brand I want any day. And I always pick like the same like 3 or 4 brands because the other 95 brands in the warehouse are just not for me. And it's not because
Right.
I just don't like them, but that doesn't mean that the
And we
brand isn't
sell a lot of
amazing.
them. Yeah. Yeah, it's they may not be the demographic, or that they may not be, the person that likes that flavor. So yeah, I found out early on a lot of even when Snapple was rolling out their million flavors, it's like a lot of the stuff, the things I liked would be failures, and the things that I hated would become, I don't like peaches, so peach tea, number one SKU.
You don't like peaches?
Yeah, I don't like peaches. I don't.
Jesus, you don't like peaches? You don't like Mexican food?
I know. I know.
And you've never had a brain freeze?
Never had a brain freeze.
Now I just think
Maybe
you're a
that's
liar.
because I don't have. No, maybe that's because there's not a lot of brains in there. But no, I've never had brain freeze.
Yeah, so obviously we've had a great management team between Pete and Bob and Kim and Crystal and people in the warehouse. And over time, I was fortunate to come up and get introduced to all these different founders and all these new brands. And like by the time I was in my like early 20s, we were like, I don't know like what year it was exactly when you were pretty much had been living in Florida for majority of the year. It was in my 20s at some point.
Mm-hmm.
But working with family is like very strange, and like it must have been interesting, like handing off or not being around and relying on your team and your son to continue to try to grow the business and whatnot. I mean, how does that work? I mean, I know to this day you're still obviously involved, but you want to enjoy your life and you want to reap the rewards of the sacrifice and the risks that you took and the time that you put in, which I am happy for you. But what does that look like? If I was to grow this into a really big business, Loom, and then we didn't sell and we held on to it, it's like, what is passing that off to William look like for me?
Well, you're not going to pass off anything until the person's ready to take it. We did. I mean, you graduated college, you came and worked with us, and you were DJing at night. You were not ready for it. You were definitely not ready for it. You were still having too much of a good time and talking about moving into New York and this and that, and then it was like an epiphany came or something, and you just got it one day. You just got it. You knew that there was something there for you, something that you could have as your own, and grow it, and saw you making excuse me, saw you making good decisions. And that's when I felt that I'm going to be fine. I don't have to be looking over your shoulder all the time. And that's very satisfying when that happens, when that day comes and you say, he's got this, he's 2.0. I always said that he's the better version of me. I would tell all the other distributors when you were going to the meetings rather than me, don't worry about it, he's the better version. So
Yeah, I mean, it's multiple lifetimes of dedication to the industry at this point to get to where we are today. So I'm at BevNet, and I'm standing out front, and I'm talking to Brian Tice. He's the guy that does all of our creative. And Anthony Kiedis from the Red Hot Chili Peppers comes walking by me. and Tice goes, "Oh, look, there's Anthony Kiedis." And I'm like, not that I'm a huge Chili Peppers fan, but I like the Chili Peppers. I've seen them before.
I
It's like
am
they made a
mad.
ton of classic songs. Like, okay, cool. So he's got a coffee company, which, in my opinion, coffee is just very, very hard category to get involved in. And that's like somebody who's not in the beverage industry that might not know any better. But you talk about an uphill battle. That's tough. That's what I like about Loom is there's really not that many people playing in our space. We have a lot of white space, which the less competition, the better. So Anthony Kiedis is going to be interviewed at BevNet, and they're interviewing him, and he's talking about his new coffee company and this and that, and he's kind of keeping it light. And I have a meeting with Whole Foods at noon, and they're like, it's like speed dating. It's like you get assigned,
Right.
you fill out a thing, and then you have them for like 15 minutes, and I'm in noon, and there's like all these like partitions set up where the buyers are sitting in each one of them. You can't even sell anything in 15 minutes. It's like, and it ends up them being like, oh yeah, no, I've seen, oh, this looks good. Yeah. Just go to the website and submit it on the portal. You know what I mean? Like, and you're like, all right. But so I'm like waiting, and it's like, I'm supposed to be there at 12 o'clock, and it's like 11:55. And I go over to like the booth where the Whole Foods buyer is, and it's Anthony Kiedis making the sales call before me. And I'm like,
Tough act to follow.
yeah. So I'm like, oh, all right. So he comes out, and the buyer's like, can you just give me 1 minute? And I'm like, yeah, sure. So I'm like standing there, and now me and him are standing like 2 feet from one another, and he's like looking at me. So if anybody else, I said, hey, how you doing? And he's like, oh, nothing. I was actually really impressed with the fact that he was making the sales call himself and like not just being the face of the brand and passing it off to like a VP of sales or something. Like I thought
Sure,
that was
sure,
actually pretty
sure.
cool. And I was like, oh, good job up there. And he's like, oh, thanks. And I was like, yeah, I saw you guys with the Stone Temple Pilots back in the day and everything. And he was like, oh man, it was a long time ago. He's like, I'm getting old. I'm like, yeah, we all are. But I was impressed with he didn't go in the back door, hung out right in the lobby with everybody, and then went and made the sales call himself, which shows a lot of character and shows his dedication to his brand. So kudos to him for that. So that was cool. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, we could pretty much talk beverage distribution stories all day. We have way too many, some that probably aren't right
We got
for
some
the
funny
air.
ones too.
Yeah. But I do appreciate you coming on and shooting the shit, especially on Father's Day. I thought it would be a good time to do it. And obviously, how I've kind of dedicated the brand towards our legacy of hard work and towards you bringing me up in the game and teaching me the ins and outs and whatnot. So I appreciate all that. And I'm really excited to see what happens in the future because we have a cool thing going on, and it's kind of an opportunity for us to get out of our comfort zone a little bit. It's like we could easily continue to, and we will, grow Seaview and do that, but it is exciting to be on the other side of the desk for once. And the possibilities are endless, really.
Yeah, I agree. And I nothing makes me happier than hearing, hearing how you came about the Loom name and anything else, like constantly sending that stuff out to my friends and this and that, like, everybody telling me how blessed I am. And it's really cool.
Yeah. Since our
And
last,
I know you're going to be successful. I just know you're going to be successful because, you never in your life, you've never quit on anything, um, and you're willing to take advice and, you're willing to listen to people and I'm not talking about myself by no means, but you're willing to listen to people that may know a little more. You're talking to the Ben Weisses and all these other people that have run the gauntlet and done this, and you're taking the playbook, and
it
it's a smart thing to do.
It's very important to know what you don't know, and there's no shame in asking for help or anything. Like there's zero shame in my game. I'm 43 years old. I got 3 kids, and it's like, the hell, I don't give a shit what anybody thinks of me. Like if I don't know what I'm doing, I'm gonna find out who's the best at knowing that part of the business, and I'm gonna knock on their door until they open up and give me the ins and outs. I think, yeah, you're right. That is a really that's something that I might not have done like in my early 20s. I might have been embarrassed, or I might have been like too hard-headed,
Right. Exactly.
I think all of this stuff came together at the perfect time. And it's crazy, since the last podcast, I mean, it's only been our second, but we had a feature. I had an article that I wrote that got published in Rolling Stone magazine. I had an article that came out in Forbes, and we got an article written about us in Sports Illustrated. And it's like, wow, all right. Since when does my opinion matter? You know what I mean? Or like voice matter? But I guess like I'm getting a little bit older now to where it's like, yeah, you get into your mid 40s, you've been doing it for as long as we have. You got to have some sort of information for the masses.
Right.
And it's cool when I go to these, like at BevNet, it's like I'm just talking to people who have been in the industry for so long. It was with Neil Kimberly, and there's just one guy after another who are like lifelong beverage people who know the ins and outs, and everybody's willing to help us out, and everybody's asking and curious and rooting for me. That's kind of cool too when you have the industry behind your back, because there's a lot of small brands. Like, there are a ton of small brands. There's so many. Oh man, I feel so bad saying this, but there's so many people where I just want to say, like, save your money, man. Like, this is a long, expensive build, and you just don't have any. You don't have any experience at all, which is fine. I mean, plenty of people have done it without experience. But like, I don't know what you're getting. Anthony Kiedis is going to be all right if his coffee company fails. You know what I mean? Like some of these other people, it's like, damn. But you never know, and that's why I still have the conversations with everybody, and I still try to help them out. And I don't know. I think all of like the trying to take care of people and do the right thing by people and be cool, and not make it super, super business all the time, has like kind of come back, and not looking for not looking for anything out of it. You know what I mean? Just trying to help people out. I feel like it's finally like starting to come back to me a little bit. So that's been rewarding, because some of the brands that we're dealing with are so difficult to do business with at this point. I feel like more than ever, these bigger, newer brands, it's just, there's no relationship at all.
Right. And I know that being, like you said, being on the other side of the desk, one of the things I always hated was when you had these new brands that had no distribution, they had nothing, they had just started, and they would come in and they'd be kissing your feet to make any progress at all. And when you would get behind them and you would really start moving, and then all of a sudden they'd get momentum, and they would forget who you were. And they would just say, yeah, you're not, we're going direct here. We're doing this, we're doing that there. I know you're never gonna be that guy. So, doing the right thing definitely makes you more successful and will make you more successful.
Yeah. I think Mike Rapoli like really drove that point home too, to where he wanted to succeed with all the people around him. And that's why all those people who worked for Vitamin Water did very well for themselves, because you rely on other people. Let's be real. Like, nobody can build a company completely by themselves. It's like you rely on your team. And that's why I'm super thankful to have the people that I'm working with right now. And I want to, and like success is best shared. You know what I mean? Like,
absolutely.
That's the best way to do it. So, cool. Well, I appreciate you taking some time out today. And I don't know. It's going to be an interesting ride. I'm sure we'll have you on again. But in the meantime, happy Father's Day.
Thank you. Happy Father's Day to you too.
Thank you. And then, yeah, we'll be in touch. Thank you for listening. This is the Loomcast, episode 2. Hope you guys had a great weekend. Talk soon. Bye.